Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends. And today I have some great friends. We're going to be talking about vulnerability. I have Jean Alford Locke here with me, who is acting sort of like a co-host for the month of August until I find out what's happening with Allison, and maybe a little bit longer. We have Avi Gordon, who lives in West Virginia, but is in New York right now. And I met him through Clubhouse. We have the old friends, old but goodies. What is it? Goodies but old? I forget. Cameron Rizvi and Jeff Pulver, and everyone share the sound. And what we're talking about is vulnerability today. And everyone is vulnerable. Everyone has, if you are being authentic and being yourself, there's always a chance that someone may say, I don't like you, or I don't like what you said. But in my mind, and I'm becoming much stronger, going and being myself is more important than pleasing other people. And that was why I picked this subject. People were talking to us and asking us about saying no to someone. Sometimes you need to say no. Sometimes it's not easy to do that, but that's what vulnerability is all about. Jean, can you take over for a moment so I get some of this together?
Sure.
We are on air. Jean, I am muting my.
Thank you, Carla. The last episode, we had some great discussion that went into the concept of vulnerability, actually, and how it actually makes you stronger when you allow yourself to be vulnerable. We kind of went deep, and I would expect that today we're going to go deep as well, because the subject lends itself to that, which is, it's fascinating, it's interesting, and you'll be surprised at how fast the time goes by, because it's such an important topic for everybody. And I wanted to bring it to some contemporary issues. We've seen on the world stage just this week, Simone Biles allowing herself not only to be vulnerable, but then to prioritize self-care over being part of the Olympics. She was very gracious, and I hope that she's not looking at Twitter to see all of the naysayers, because that act of taking care of herself is showing each of us that we can do it, no matter who we are, no matter what comes at us. And she apparently, in one article that I read, she said that she was up in the middle doing what was supposed to be a 2.5 twist, and she got what they call lost, and she ended up doing a 1.5 twist. They call that in gymnastics the twisties, but it's actually a very dangerous thing to happen, because the landing could be very dangerous and could hurt somebody very badly. So I really give her props for being able to stand up, prioritize her own self-care on the world stage, but to teach the world a lesson on taking care of yourself first, being vulnerable, and understanding the power of our mental health, because it's being stated that it's a mental issue. And we don't know the pressures that somebody like that is under. We know the pressures we're under. And those pressures can cause us to project something we're not, just so that we don't look vulnerable. And yet when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, that gives you that point where you can grow. With that, should we kick it over to Cameron?
Thank you, Jean. Thank you very much, Carla, for having me again after such a long gap and not getting very annoyed with me. In terms of what you have summarized, Jean, vulnerability itself stems from what I've learned largely from Brené Brown and her talk on vulnerability, which has gone viral, power of vulnerability. And that initiated me to this domain and this area. And of course, once you get rolling, then you gain insights from new experiences and you relate whatever you may have heard with your own direct observation, experience, and what's going on within yourself as an individual. And what I felt really at the end of it is that it is so important for us to rely on other people. I mean, I'm taking reliance on other people because if I want to go far, I need to go together. If I want to go fast, I go alone. And I have a feeling that this human connection can only happen when there is a lot of trust and dependability and comfort in knowing that there are people with you and that you're in a community that cares. Now, to be able to get to that stage, which is an ideal romanticized stage, I have a feeling that unless one is open and candid about one's own self, because none of us, for a start, can claim to be perfect, none of us. And I think it all begins with an acceptance that I'm human, I'm imperfect, I make mistakes, and to be able to admit that to near and dear ones. Because to be vulnerable across the board universally, I don't think that is a wise thing necessarily. But in a closed, controlled group, if one is able to open up and not be afraid of being judged, I feel that that is huge because it is only then when others reciprocate and share their stories. And all of us have stories. And I find that just recently I came across Mike Tyson, what he was in his heyday, and how profoundly he has changed to going into self reflection and through his podcasts. I mean, he's become he's an embodiment of vulnerability, if you ask me. Someone so mighty, so strong, so vicious, so crude, so blunt, to be reflecting on life, the purpose of life, what he's gone through, what it means to be alive, and it just shows how important it is. It's a humanizing experience, and I have a feeling that a lot of times we wear masks and we live a life of pretense, which in fact, and we fake it so long that we truly deny ourselves the pleasures of everyday experiences. And true connection happens when there are tears in our eyes, tears of joy, tears of pain and sorrow and grief, because all of these emotions that we deny ourselves are so true of us. And I have a feeling that whenever I've engaged in an encounter with friends and we've said, hey, listen, let's talk about life, just this word life. What is it? What does it mean? Where are we headed? Where are we coming from? What are we trying to prove? And then that conversation just goes into so many alleys that I can't tell you. And it only happens when there's a climate of respect, acceptance of each other, and not having to prove anything. I mean, do I have to prove that I'm human? I don't. I think just the fact that I'm human in itself is worthy of celebration. Everything about me, good and bad and ugly and whatever, is very much a human story. So vulnerability is the way to connect with other people, and that happens when there is trust. And without human connections, life sucks.
Are you finished, Cameron? I thought you were continuing. We can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm finished for now. For now.
Okay, Jeff, do you want to give us your definition of vulnerability?
Well, I think Cameron and Jean covered, certainly part of vulnerability. And I think, regardless of what the dictionary may say or may not about vulnerability, it's also how we act upon it as humans, as energy sources, as entities. From my perspective, there's humanity and then there's non-humanity. And so, like, if you look at a way a company promotes a brand, typically those brands are not vulnerable. They actually have no humanity associated with them because they're promoting a product or service. And an individual, even in a spokesperson for that brand, can sometimes be vulnerable. And if any of you have ever spoken in front of thousands of people on stage, one of the absolute best ways to connect to the audience is to share your vulnerability the moment you get on stage, to let go of that wall, the same wall that sometimes is up between people, and talk through your wall and open up yourself and allow yourself to feel and to be introspective and at the same time grounded and at the same time speaking at a vibration, energy, and frequency that allows you to both feel the room and for the room to feel you, sometimes without words being spoken. And vulnerability is probably one of the biggest strengths one could have. And those who think it's a weakness will learn to how to judge their opponent if we're playing games. In terms of what it means, it allows ourselves to be honest with ourselves, and that's a challenge, though. And one of the most difficult, uncomfortable situations is when you want to speak a truth with a friend, a loved one, and you for whatever reason there's a wall. But it's like you could tell a truth to a stranger, an absolute deep secret to a stranger, be very vulnerable and be open to hear what they have to say. And we usually will listen to that stranger, but when you actually want to talk to that person who this is affected by or who you want to talk to, we block it. And so we're vulnerable on two levels, right? We're vulnerable to that stranger to hear how they react to how we are seeing the world, but we're most sensitive to the words of the loved one who we are almost afraid in some cases to be vulnerable in front of, because we may not like that reaction. But typically, if you allow yourself to put on that mask of protection, or perhaps to unmask yourself so that you actually are one of your true selves, it's just we have to allow ourselves to be who we are, and to be grounded, and in my case, connected to source, and be in flow, and really to have the courage to share our voice. I believe that when we are most connected, we are embracing the vulnerability of the soul, but at the same time protected by the world. And when we speak our truth, there's no greater good than we can offer than to be who we are. And frankly, if I'm having a vulnerable conversation with somebody and I'm being open and honest, and sometimes there are tears involved, and that other person is being a rock, I realize, okay, they're not for me. I'm not going to attempt to blast that rock, nor will I actually attempt to do any further. I may withdraw and focus my energy where I could better spend it, because either the voice is being rejected or the timing isn't right, because they're just not ready to hear what I want to say or what I'm ready to say. And at the same time, I think that vulnerability is one of those words which, while it takes on so many different meanings, it allows us to be real. And I can tell you that it is one of the most powerful weapons we have in our personal arsenal, to allow ourselves to be on that edge, the edge of who we are, and be connected, and to feel, and to be open to receiving what that means. So I bring vulnerability into my day each and every day. The shows that I do live, there's an element of vulnerability, but it also comes with being open and not being closed, and not being that brand that has no feelings. That years ago I hosted a conference on the humanization of brands, and I was quite curious, if you worked for a major product company and you were tweeting somebody, and that person happened to have a bad day, was a brand allowed to go off script and actually share compassion because there was something emotional happened, someone died or something magical happened, and it was magical? Can that brand actually show that they're human, actually, that there is actually not a bot but a person behind it? And this is 10 years ago, there was a mixed bag of feelings there. I truly believe that when we're in the human experience, no matter who we represent, ultimately it's our soul that we connect with and share. And if you have the strength to allow yourself to be vulnerable, there's no ever reason to apologize for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Avi, do you want to give your feelings on vulnerability? And people, please share this out so your friends, family, and friends to be know that we're here. Just click on that share button under us, and it will go out to anyone and everyone. Avi, you've been talking about vulnerability a lot recently, so I'm putting you on stage about it.
Yeah, it comes to me now too is that every moment is an opportunity, and even what you're just talking about, sharing, right? What's between me and sharing something on my page, right? That's the feeling of being vulnerable. What are people going to say about me? So I like to look for all of the opportunities, all of the examples of a certain subject that feels meaningful to me. And my goodness, there's been so much said here that has been really profound and impactful. Something to add is just my growing belief that when I'm vulnerable, I'm really offering a gift to others, maybe the most precious gift, because we're social creatures, we're social beings. Like, the power of the influence of community, I think, is understated, under-recognized a lot. And that's just how it is, that we're set up that way. And so understanding that that's how it is, then it's a call for a leadership to realize that if I change, hopefully in a positive direction, that creates a ripple effect. And so if I start to open up my own being and take self-love a little bit more seriously, that's not going to only make my life better. It's really going to give other people permission to do the same thing. And so the reason why I focus on this and emphasize this is because I think seeing the effect that it has outside of myself on a larger scale, that gives me fuel in this practice. Like, if it's only for my benefit, if I'm only trying to improve my being, then okay, like that is that's valid. That has a certain amount of energy to it. But if I realize that this work that I'm doing towards self-love and towards being open is helping to heal other people and allow them to be themselves, wow, that's a whole other level of motivation towards this practice. So I've got some other stuff, but maybe I'm going to pause on that for now and just leave it there.
Actually, it was your clubhouse rooms on vulnerability that brought me to this topic, Avi. So I would like you to continue, because it was what made me think that vulnerability is something that everyone can learn from. And to be honest, I looked at all the comments that everyone said each time you did a vulnerability room on Clubhouse in the back channel, and it was amazing what they were saying. Because you're right, vulnerability is something that affects all of us. And we stop being vulnerable when we're afraid, oh, I don't want to do this, but I want this person to like me, so I'm going to do it anyway. And you go and you do it, and you do a half-baked job because you don't want to do it. Would it be kinder to us and also the other person not to do it than to agree to do something that you don't want to do? And I'm throwing it back to you for a moment, Avi, because you inspired this. And you didn't know that part, but when I spoke to you at 12:30 last night and you said, do you really want me there? I knew I wanted you there because you were the inspiration for the topic. So, Avi, go to it. And we'll go to everyone else, but I want you to talk a little.
Yeah, so what you're saying sparked in me this idea of priority. What are my priorities? So what I notice that happens in my internal world, there's so much in my internal world that in a way needs sorting out and will never be completely sorted out. But I see it as my job to observe what's happening so that I can organize my internal world as much as possible. So I say that because here's this thing, vulnerability. It's this concept. Where does that fall on my list of priorities, right? So let's take another one, being liked. I want to be liked by other people. So we have these two different priorities that are in my mind. I want to be liked, and I have the intention of being vulnerable. Well, if I feel that being vulnerable is going to make someone like me less, then those two things are in conflict. So in a way, I need to choose, what is my allegiance? Is my allegiance to being liked, or is my allegiance to displaying my true self, right? So when I get that straight, that really clears things up for me. And my allegiance really is toward being vulnerable as much as possible. You know, I forget that it's totally a practice. And there's no other way. When I look at it, something I say is I can't not be myself, so I might as well be myself. Right? Like you try to put on a mask, and even the mask that I try to put on is still me. It's just maybe not as an authentic aspect of me. So why not go for that authentic aspect? Why not really let go? And it's this letting go. I think that is essential. The rigidity, trying to manipulate someone else, caring about what they think, that is not where I want to be. It's this relaxed sense of being. And again, it's taking the self-care much more seriously. And I see my daughter, I see children, and the idea of not accepting themselves is laughable, right? Like, what do you mean not accept I was just born. This is just how I am. I came into this world, and this is me, and I'm just going to be me. What do you mean you're not being you? How can you not be you, right? So the children are the teachers, and to look at them and say, well, I have a right to be. I have a right to exist. And not only that, if I take on that right to exist and exemplify it, then other people are going to do that too, and I could see that on a larger scale. Okay, Carla, pausing again.
Thanks, Avi. You can be quiet for a while, and I want to pass this on to Jean.
I'm laughing on the inside and the outside, Avi. I believe that we can learn so much from our kids. In fact, I believe I grew more mature and more into my adult self as I raised my son, who's now 30, because there were times when he went through something and I had that choice. You know, I could say to myself, this is how mom and dad handled it. This is how I would like to handle it differently. And I often went with, I want to handle it differently. And that helped me to grow. And become vulnerable to my parents, for example, because they would say, you know, he's getting out of hand. You need to have a stronger hand on him. You should be swatting him more often. And I chose not to raise him that way. And that made me a much stronger parent. And now that I'm a new grandparent, I get to relive that and learn lessons from a different level from my grandkids and how curious they are, how completely open they are. If I were to just follow my grandson, okay, he's 2 years old, so I wouldn't be able to make it through half the day because we don't have that kind of energy. But just the amount of curiosity that little boy has is amazing. I had him for a couple of days while his little sister was being born, and there wasn't a drawer that didn't get open. There wasn't a button that didn't get pushed. There wasn't a knob that didn't get turned, you know, and he just wanted to see how things worked. And that level of curiosity, if we could bring that back just for half an hour every day to think about how does that work or why is that important, that opens us up to some new discoveries about ourselves. And those new discoveries open us up to a level of vulnerability that we've had. The only word I can think of is socialized out. We've learned, and I think that I think this is an interesting concept to explore. We've learned behaviors through going to school, through being with family and going to family events. They'll say something like, "That's not how we do it. This is how we do it," you know, or what you said wasn't nice, but not taking it to the next point. Now you need to apologize and say something nice, which is something I learned when my son was little. The point is that we have behaviors that are acceptable to the folks that are in our circle, in our inner circle and in our wider circle. They're acceptable. And then we have behaviors and ideas that we already deem not acceptable because of past experience. And we need to become aware of that and ask ourselves, why not? Why shouldn't I do this? So it kind of, one of my favorite quotes is the one from Marianne Williamson that says, you know, why are you not shining your light? Who are you not to shine your light? You know, that we're afraid to shine our lights because we don't want others to judge us. We don't want others to think that they're less than. Whatever the reason is, we need to shine our light. There's a reason we're here, and there are things that we need to give to the world. I'm a communications expert. I've spent my life putting together messages and building brands, as Jeff had mentioned earlier. And now I help people figure out how they want to present themselves to the world when they do presentations and such. And I'm always reminding them, you have a light inside. You have words and wisdom that the world needs to hear. You know, one of the things that I love about these conversations is that we're showing people how to talk civilly to each other, something that it seems like has gone away. And I say seems underscored because that's the image out in the world, but it's not true. On a human level, we still talk to each other. We still argue with each other. Sometimes we might meet somebody and we don't agree with them. Jeff had said, you know, when he's vulnerable and somebody's just standing there not being affected, that he walks away. Well, that does happen. But on the larger scale, we have to be able to have conversations and learn and be curious and understand why somebody who doesn't agree with us, where are they coming from, to actually listen to them. I think it's a miracle when people actually listen to each other. Even on the political front, which seems to be fraught with, you know, everything's black or white, you know, you can't be in the middle. Well, I wrote a blog post years ago that this black and white thinking needs to stop because there's a million shades of gray in between. And there's always something that we can agree on. And many of us shy away from pushing to that, from pushing forward through the conflict and finding that place where we can agree. And when you can, it opens the door. So, I have an example of a neighbor who we are diametrically opposed on the political front, but we pushed through, and I stated to her why I had an idea, and I said, what is yours? And now we can talk to each other, where if I'd have just reacted the way I wanted to, I would have a neighbor that would be a forever enemy, and that's not the way I want to live. So I let myself be vulnerable, but I was strong. My other neighbor who witnessed it was like, I've never seen anybody just stay so strongly. And I thought, you didn't know what was going on inside of me. So I also want to point out, we have the inner world that you talked about and the outer world. And I think that in that moment, you have a choice between whatever the stimulus and whatever the response is. You get to make a choice, and that's heaven or hell. You get to have a choice to push through and find peace, or to not push through and stay chaotic. I tend to want to find peace, so I push through. It's wonderful to see and to hear that others actually agree with me on this. But we have that power. And even though I don't have a world stage with 1 million people, following me, it's okay. I have an inner circle of people that I can influence and hopefully get them to see my perspective. And then they go out and talk to theirs. And it's the old Breck commercial. I told 2 friends, they told 2 friends, and so on and so on. And change happens that way. So, every time we walk out the door, we can affect change that will eventually reach, the world level. And that comes from us allowing ourselves to be a little bit uneasy, a little bit afraid, but pushing through.
Thank you, Jeannie. I love it. It's important just learning and feeling comfortable to push through and move forward. Because many people think, oh no, I can't do that because people are going to ridicule me. But that's not necessarily the case. People are going to respect you more if you push through and you do what you want to do. Comrade?
Yes, thank you. I was listening to Ari and what's happening inside, and the priorities that he was pointing out, to whether to be light or to be vulnerable, and these choices that we make. And then Jean echoed some of those choices, and that between stimulus and response. And I was just saying to myself, in some form, Gary Zukav came to mind, and he speaks of authentic power. And in that, what I really found very useful, and I think it somehow links with this, is that what keeps us from connecting with our deeper inner self. And I find that ego, which expresses itself in arrogant behavior, that prevents us from going deep within. And if we were to look at what the world overall, you'll find that there are 2 forces that build a world that we all want to see, a world that is prosperous, peaceful, fair, equitable, and stuff like that. And it comes from love and generosity. Love and generosity. And of course, many shades from there. And when we look at the world as we see it today, very, very volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, conflictual, with lots of injustices happening around the world. It is stemming from two things, again, broadly, hate and greed. And if we were to look at love and generosity, those are very spiritual. And hate and greed are driven by the ego itself. There is no end to greed. There is no end to hate. And they're both very destructive forces. And vulnerability will bring peace to us because it will allow us to recognize the ugly aspects that stem from this ignorance that we suffer. And once we recognize that and we submit ourselves to the higher power, the cosmic power that Jeff often refers to, it is then that we evolve into and grow into love and begin to see the spiritual dimension, the soul dimension of ourselves. And when our choices are aligned with our soul, that is when we are at our best. And when we are in conflict with our own selves, I feel that is when we are not being vulnerable, not being true to ourselves. And I have a feeling that vulnerability is that place which comes from humility, from knowing that you know nothing. And once you accept that, then the divine forces play their part. And you start to gain insight. It's only through confusion that we come to clarity. And what we don't want is confusion. What we can't handle sometimes is uncertainty. These are aspects around us, and we need to accept them as a phenomena. And only when we allow things to happen, it's like learning how to swim. For the first time, ask any person who has never gone into a swimming pool, ask them to swim, and their reaction will tell you how stupid we are. No one drowns, and then the fear is all manufactured in the head. But when you submit to water and you align yourself with nature, all that chaos and conflict and confusion disappears. And I love the sight of human beings floating on water. It's, without doing much, just floating. And that is the fruit of vulnerability, trust, and connection. And I have a feeling that we need to, manage our egos, get them out of the way so that we can not only see, but feel and connect with our spirit and also with people around us. Because ultimately, we are all raindrops. We like raindrops with identities. We all have a skin around us and hurtling down from the clouds to the ocean till we hit the ocean and we discover we're all one.
Thank you, Cameron. I have a question for you. Confusion.
Yes.
Isn't how you defined it and how I've been thinking about it myself recently. Doesn't confusion keep us from growing? Because we get stuck. Should I go this way or go that way? Isn't it more important to just take that right or left turn and not worry about what's going to happen in the future?
Good, Carla, good question. I mean, our paradigm determines how we view confusion. Do we view it as a threat or an opportunity? So it goes back to what Jean was saying, our upbringing. And if confusion has always been disturbing, then obviously I'd run away from it. I would panic. I would not think straight. But if we embrace confusion, and if we learn to do that, then you see, from cradle to grave, our job is to learn, to grow, to develop, to progress, to refine, to become better, to step out of our comfort zones and forever keep stepping out so that we keep discovering and moving forward. Confusion gives rise to questions. And if there were no questions in our head, how the hell would we begin to learn anything? And I have a feeling that contradictions give rise to confusion. Confusion stimulates the mind if viewed in the positive way. And only then does curiosity create insights of the kind that Socrates and Plato and others had when they had no internet, they had no electricity, they had no cell phones and devices of any kind. And look at the amount of discoveries that took place 2,500, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. And today we are just, at a flick of a button, having access and talking globally on a device, right, sitting in our bedrooms or studies or wherever we are. So yes, confusion is, I think, at the heart of inquiry and questions. And a mind without questions is not learning. And if it's not learning, what is it doing? I wonder.
Thank you, Comrade, because confusion makes us grow if we're willing to take action. Jeff, do you want to say something?
Sure. I mean, well, so we are made of cosmic dust, right? And so, and some of us may believe that we carry our present, our future, and our past with us because we are our own universe. And universes create the creation of a new universe creates lots of confusion because there's chaos, and until things settle into the way it's meant to be. So there are times when confusion is actually exactly what it's meant to be. That if you had absolute clarity on everything that was going to happen, your existence would not be as challenging and as fun as it is today. Just as if you could look at your entire existence on this planet and knew exactly what was going to happen before, you might be bored. You might think it'd be nice to know the future, but then you're cursed by it because things will happen exactly the way that it's meant to be if you allow yourself to understand what the implications of that are. And if you believe that you can control your destiny, God bless you. And somewhere in between, there's a truth. And in that truth, there is a vulnerability that there's no guarantee you'll be here in yet another second. That all we ever have and ever had and ever will ever have is the now. That you need to learn to let go of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and learn to embrace each breath, because that's the gift. No guarantees there'll be another breath to follow. But when you can take a breath and hold it and be present and look into your mind and be proud of where you're at, that's a gift that starts to give clarity and understanding and meaning to everything. For some, being in a vulnerable state, whether they got there on purpose or got there because of actions of others, might be the step toward understanding the higher meaning of where things are at. When we have conversations with others, I believe there is the implied rules of engagement that certainly when I have forums of people together, there's an understanding, explicit and implicit, that we respect each other, that we hear what each other has to say, and that we, if we find a point of entanglement, we can agree to disagree, but not to debate. And we cast aside to look for the higher level, the higher source of connection. There are energetic sources that are not so compatible with what I just said. There are people that use, I'll call it false empowerment, but they'll use our openness and our ability to connect almost like a weapon, and they go on the attack. But in the end, I don't believe they win. And I certainly believe that when you allow yourself to speak to the higher good and bring your entity forward through it, those are things for you to understand what that really means and how we connect, right? And how you can unleash the light that you contain into the universe that you carry into. And so, vulnerability to me is a gateway to a higher understanding of self, as much as it is a gateway to understanding others. And there are people who block. There are people who grow up in an environment where they're not allowed to let go because their environment does not let them, and it makes it very challenging to communicate and to connect in situations like that. But it's I do believe in free will. I believe that we have the opportunity, at least when we see it, to do what it is we are meant to do. How we get there, I found is through manifestation. And if you want to manifest a future, letting go of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, letting go of expectations, being open to what the outcome will be without setting a time for it to happen, are all on that pathway. And along the way, you may be vulnerable, but at the same time, you may find your greatest strength. The journey is up to you to experience. It's not to be told, it's to be experienced. Perhaps you could then share your journey with others, but it is a life worth living. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I hate this microphone thing. You gave a lot of wisdom. And I think confusion is actually a topic in and of itself, the more I hear people talk, because confusion, I know when I'm confused, I'm stuck. But I decide I gotta go somewhere, make a move. And when I make the move, everything goes as it should be. And we consider it goes as it should be as we made the decision, but was that really planned before? And we are going to be going off air very soon. Cameron, would you like to add a few extra words, please?
Yes. Destiny came up, choice came up in our conversation on vulnerability, and met an example I heard from a friend recently explaining the difference between destiny and choice. He says, your height is your destiny. How much you weigh is your choice. So I thought that was a remarkable way of clarifying the difference. Is it choice or is it destiny? I think it's a combination of both.
I agree. Anything else, Cameron?
I love you.
Thank you, Cameron. I think I needed that today. Avi?
Yeah. I think it's important to realize that we are vulnerable. Vulnerable is not something that I need to do. I'm actually just realizing the situation of my vulnerability. As Jeff said, I have no idea what's going to happen the next moment. And so this is just reality, that here I am existing. I'm completely vulnerable to larger forces beyond myself. So this subject of vulnerability is actually just stepping into the truth of what is. I also want to mention humility, which was spoken about too. Like the not knowing what's going on. All this here in our conversation, what we like to do, like we like to figure out. That's what the human mind, I think, wants. But we don't know, And what I'm finding more and more is it's okay that I don't know. Like part of the knowing, like on the path of trying to figure it out, is dropping all of that and just saying, I don't know. I give it up. I'm doing my best. That's all that I can do. Yeah. Thanks so much for this conversation. Love it.
Thank you for coming and adding to it, because really you were the inspiration for the word. I just didn't tell you until today. Jeff, a few words, and then I want to go to Jeannie to sum it up.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. And I do believe that we are here, and we might as well enjoy what that means to each and every one of us. Give ourselves a chance to embrace who we are and learn to love ourselves more. I think that vulnerability, as we were talking about, it's almost from us to the outside, but what about us to the inside? And to learn to embrace a practice of self-love and to find me time, not that is not time for you and I, but for time for the inner you to talk and be present for you, is sometimes the most precious time there is. And while there's nothing guaranteed, I've found that when you can set aside time for yourself to do the little things, the teeny things, the little bit things that no one else would ever possibly understand, including your close loved ones, because you really don't tell them these things. That's the most satisfying time of the day for me at times. And it's what I use to get grounded and to recharge so I can embrace a new day and can appreciate where I'm at. And that I found here in the world we're in, that the more we can do for ourselves and find that fuel, it's almost like a cosmic energy that gives us a recharge, that that's a gift. And so and chaos, and confusion, yeah, maybe they have negative connotations at times, but there are times when you can go through chaos to have absolute clarity too. And you don't know that necessarily until you go through the process, and then you truly understand where we're at. So thanks for a wonderful word of the day, and nice to see all of you. And I look forward to future episodes.
Thank you, Jeff and Jeannie.
Thank you, Carla. I said in the beginning that I thought this would go deep. I think it went deep. There's a lot of wisdom. I think we should, grab a transcript so that we can immortalize all this great wisdom. What I take away is that vulnerability opens us up to a process that we get to learn about ourselves. And when we allow that process to happen, we're going to find a pearl of wisdom that's going to help us grow and move forward. The other thing is that it's also a practice, believe it or not, practice being vulnerable, because the more you do it, the easier it becomes so that you can keep moving forward. It's kind of the old adage, how do you cross a great expanse? You put one foot in front of the other. Or I think it was Confucius who said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. But every time we take a new step, there's a ripple effect. And, so we're in a pond, we step into it, we see the ripples go, but it changes the pond, but it changes us. And we need to not be afraid of change. And that's what vulnerability signals. We're going to be going through a change, and that's okay, because an hour ago, I wasn't the person I am right now. I have some new wisdom, and, don't take this the wrong way, gentlemen, but I'm going to be stealing some of it, because it's changed me. Just hearing this has changed me. And that's the beauty of being vulnerable. We get to change in that moment. We get to support somebody like Simone Biles by simply sending her energy of support. By thinking, here in Sacramento, Simone, I'm with you. That helps her way back, when she's in Tokyo. She's far, far, far away. But on the higher levels of energy, I'm sending her support. We can do that with Naomi. She was one of the first. Naomi Osaka is one of the first big star athletes that I noticed taking a break for self-care reasons, for mental health reasons, and I'm all for it. I've changed, and listening to Kamran and Avi and Jeff, I've changed profoundly on a number of levels, and I thank you guys. Being vulnerable and listening to others give their insights, it's a gift, as Jeff said. It's a gift. It's a gift to be present and hear. It's a gift to be present and hear somebody who doesn't agree with you, and to figure out at the very core what the issue is, because that tells you more about you than it does about them. And we're here on this earth, I believe, to love each other, to grow, and to come to a point where we do have total peace, but it's peace inside of us. And we get that through that growth, and being able to walk through the confusion that you talked about, Carla, to understand that confusion is a learning point, to take a deep breath and accept that confusion. That's when you throw that rock in the pond and all the water, the silt comes up and it gets kind of murky. It settles down, and then you have that clear pond again, but it's a different pond. And that's what confusion does for us. It allows us to be vulnerable and to learn and to have things fall in place, as you said. So what a blessed, great conversation this was. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you, Jeannie. I really appreciate that because I'm feeling the same way. Vulnerability. I had to mute you. Vulnerability. And that's part of vulnerability. Being able to see a mistake or you do something wrong and you say it. And you don't hide it saying, oh, Jeannie's going to be mad at me if I mute her. Well, too bad. If I mute her, I'm making it easier for everyone else to hear. And it's not just for me I do things. I do it for those people around me. Because when there's peace within, there's peace outside. And vulnerability allows for that peace to grow in the moment and not to be stuck because you want to make someone happy. It means being able to say no, even when it seems so difficult to say no to someone. I had to do something very difficult last night with someone and unfriend the person because I didn't like what was going on. But I had to do it in order to create the peace around me as well as within me. So vulnerability has a lot of aspects to it. And this conversation made that even more clear. Having said that, we have come to an hour of MindPlore. We will be back on Tuesday with another episode and another topic of the week. But I think I'm going to kind of take it from this conversation now because confusion is really kind of staying in my mind. And I see Jeannie writing it down to remind me that I said it. Thank you, guys. We are going to end now. Can we all wave goodbye? And we'll see you on the other end. Bye.